Hey everybody, it's Faulkner time. Justin couldn't come up with a joke this week, and also the recording thing we use is a little unstable, so we're going.
Whatever we get, we get.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're reading William Faulkner this month. Pretty difficult author, kind of the opposite of Hemingway, and he wrote in the same era, in the same country. So
They had a little
very
bit of a
interesting.
feud.
They did. I read at one point that Hemingway was supposed to write an introduction for a collection of Faulkner stories, and Faulkner said, "Not him, anyone but him."
Holy
Pretty
cow!
much.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's pretty. I don't think those are exact words, but pretty much that's what he said.
I wonder how far
It probably was something like, more professional than that. I don't remember exactly what it was.
Faulkner, it's probably gonna last like a couple pages.
Yeah. So anyways,
I'm Justin.
I'm Pierce. We'll be talking Faulkner novels next week. However, this week we're going to be talking about 4 short stories written by the man himself, William Faulkner. And yeah, those short stories are Dry September, Barn Burning, A Rose for Emily, and 2 Soldiers. Justin, which one do you want to start with?
It's a Dry September.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was actually the one I was thinking of ending with, but sure, we'll do that.
Yeah,
I asked, so
yeah. I don't know what you expected. So, Dry September. This is the story about just a couple of people like in a barbershop, and they're talking about this black man. And we're cleaning up the terms here because Faulkner really loved to use that racial slur, candidly even, which is coming. We may address it later. About
we don't know if he used it candidly in real life. He could have. He was a Southerner himself. It's totally possible. But he did use it candidly in his writing.
Yes. And interestingly, this story is about a man. It's about a group of people discussing a local crime trial. And what happened is that the jury acquitted, the court acquitted the black man from assaulting a woman. But the people do not like that, and it's kind of ambiguous as to if he was guilty, but really not that ambiguous. And it cuts back and forth between the woman who claims to be the one who claimed to be assaulted, and she's kind of not all there. And then the people at the barbershop plan on killing the person or to send a message.
You're going way out of order. She's it's not revealed that she's not all there until like the end of the story.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty early on. I don't know. Okay.
Well, I mean, you also are introducing her before you're done with the barber conversation, which she's the first time her perspective is even shown is after they leave the barbershop.
Well, okay. Well, with that information, it does actually come to a head. The barber is very reluctant about this, going, "Hey, man, I don't want to hurt anybody." And as the people are going there, he just kind of jumps out. I think he tries to stop them, tries to convince them not to do it, and they just keep going with it and doesn't want anything to do with it because it's kind of a futile attempt to really stop them. And then they eventually do it. It's kind of implied, shown off page, not really shown explicitly. But like it showed afterhand, like the amount of black people walking around that area is a lot less of them, because I think it kind of sent a message. And I think the woman, we flip back to her perspective, she starts laughing maniacally, right? I think that's the word for it. Yeah. And yeah, and story ends right there. Oh no, and then we
go back to the leader of the lynch gang,
yes.
McClendon, who goes back to his house, and we see him go. He walks into his home, and his wife is waiting for him, even though it's very late. And he's like, "What did I tell you about waiting for me?" And then he hits her, and then he changes his shirt or something.
Not that again, Pierce isn't laughing that that's funny.
No,
It's just like yeah,
it's funny that he's just the he changes his shirt or something was funny
yeah,
to me. Um, he's like, God, I'm so sweaty, and he changes his clothes.
yeah.
And that's how the story ends. But you did rush through it a little bit.
Okay.
Um, the scene where they're talking in the barber shop, our main character, the or I guess one of the main characters, the barber, he says that he doesn't believe the black man did it because he knows him. He knows Will
Oh,
Mays. And he doesn't believe it at all. And they're arguing back and forth, and they're like, you some kind of black person lover.
you're cleaning up the language here.
Um, and and he's like, "No, I just, I know Will Mays. He didn't do it." And they're like, we'll show you what happens to people who love those people, guy." And it gets heated in the barber shop,
Yeah.
and that's like a huge thing. And it even shows like the guy who's getting his haircut right then is like not from town. He's from like another town in the south, and he's like, um, I'm not from around here, but I'm a good Southern man, and God, if a black person had done that to one of our ladies in our town, we wouldn't stand for it. And it's supposed to show like it's not just Jefferson, it's the whole South that's got this like poison mindset.
Jefferson's the city that it takes place
Yeah,
in.
that most Faulkner stories take place in.
Yeah.
Um, and eventually, like the McClendon gets them all up in a fury. They leave, and then it cuts to telling the story of the woman Minnie, who it kind of tells her like life story for a page where she's like, she's like young and skinny and like everyone wants her, and then she grows old and less people want her, and so therefore she's like, you know,
Mhm.
gets a little weird.
Yeah.
She starts getting upset about it. Like not even the men who sit in the windows are watching her as she walks down the street anymore, and she's like upset about it or whatever. Um, and I will say, originally, the barber is not going with them, right? The way that you told it, it felt like
Okay.
he was
Yeah.
going with them, which he didn't. He was chasing after them to try and get them to stop. Um, and then he eventually got in the car, still kind of protesting, but also a little bit worried about what they would do to him if he kept protesting. Um, and I guess the important thing that I would like to point out for my interpretation of this story is that all this time McClendon is like he's like, oh, not good. Um, or not McClendon, the barber. Sorry, the barber's like,
Yeah.
oh, this isn't good. And all of the people who the barber gets into the car with end up beating the black man before they force him into the car. And then the reason why he jumps out of the car is because, as I think, Will Mays, the black man, he's like freaking out in the car, and the barber accidentally hits him. And right after that, he's like, "I need to get out," and he jumps out of the car. Um, and to me, that says that he feels guilty because he feels like he's like a part of it, even though he's not, right? He doesn't want to do this, but he's along for the ride, and therefore he is
Mhm.
guilty, or he feels just as guilty because he's an accomplice. He's not actually stopping it from happening.
Yeah.
That's what that's supposed to like represent. He's still causing harm by not doing anything about it actually.
Yeah.
um that's what the hit represents, rather.
Yeah.
And then the scene where she starts laughing maniacally, you can see that the point of that section is that the men's eyes start returning to her because she claims that she was assaulted. Somebody wanted her, and so
Oh.
now all the other men want her too. And the reason she laughs maniacally is because she realizes that isn't everything. That doesn't make her feel good again. like she thought it would, and she probably feels guilty for what she's done after overhearing some of the men in the room she walked through talk about how they took care of Will Mays.
This, yeah. Um, this reminds me of bit of the, tragically, the Emmett
Mhm.
Till story, or Emmett Till, like the actual crime that happened, where
Yeah,
a little black boy was accused of sexually assaulting a white woman, and the white woman lied.
yeah.
So I'm guessing this is kind of a, I don't know when
Eh,
the story was written, but I think it wouldn't be too far of a cry to say this was
yeah.
kind of inspired by it.
It also reminded me of just uh to catch a mockingbird. What
To
am I
Kill a
thinking?
Mockingbird.
To
To
kill a
Kill a
mockingbird.
Mockingbird.
I don't know where I am right now.
Yeah.
To kill a mockingbird, just it's less like the complaint about To Kill a Mockingbird being like a white savior book. I don't completely agree with it. However, like this is, kind of, it's not the same thing obviously, but it's like kind of a similar message, except acknowledging that somebody who's not actively fighting is complicit basically
Yeah.
in because he could have taken action. Realistically, there is more that he probably could have done, and he did not do it.
Yeah.
um my other interpretation, which you could call a bit of a stretch, but death of the author, so
Yeah.
I'm immune to all
Criticism.
criticism. Um, is that
Holy.
the barber is a bit of a self insert on the part of Faulkner,
Yeah.
because Faulkner was very much a white moderate in the South.
Mm.
He was he was not progressive, but he was not progressive. Okay. Like,
Okay.
he wanted the violence to come to a stop. He clearly is against, because it's not super clear whether or not Will Mays actually did it or not, although the story I think makes it clear that he doesn't.
Yeah.
We're never outright told that he didn't do it. And so it feels like almost there's a um that Faulkner realizes that this is unjust, even if he did do it. Um, and it feels as if, to me, that the barber is kind of Faulkner himself, being like, there's more that I could do
Mm.
um in the South to help black people. And I'm not doing it, and therefore I'm like
Yeah.
complicit in it. Um
I haven't read much about like Faulkner being a racist. I mean, I haven't done much research into it, or I can't
yeah,
refute or anything like that. But I think the story kind of makes it clear about where his, at least his social politics lie. Um, he's not, he's not
he's
like Lovecraft levels of
yeah,
racist.
he's not pro lynching is what we get from this story. He is
Yes,
anti lynch mob.
or really anti-mob justice as
Yeah,
well.
that too, yes.
Kind of goes hand in hand.
Um so yeah, I think, like, again, that you could say that's a little bit of a stretch, but I think there's some basis for it, that this barber is somewhat of a self-insert.
Yes. All right. I don't have anything else to say about the story. I feel like we covered all the ground there. Um, so the next one, which shall
Let's
be
get a rose for Emily out of the way.
Rose Family. Honestly, the story's pretty overhyped. I'm
Well,
saying it right now.
this is both of our least favorite, I think, out of the four that we read.
Yeah.
It's just okay. Basically, it's there's a narrator telling the story after Emily has died, um, and he talks about her, like, life, um, where her dad had a deal. I think it's her dad had a deal with the town that he wouldn't pay taxes, and so when he died, some people assumed that deal died with him, and so so they went up, and she was like, "No, I don't pay taxes to this town." Um, and there's a couple other weird things that happen, like in the second section, um,
Isn't there a guy, like a former Confederate general, that just comes in
I
or
don't
something
think
like
we're
that?
I don't think we're there yet, but yeah. Um,
Does he get like a servant? I think this story's pretty forgettable, to
there
be
is there
honest.
is there is a, yes, there is a servant. So in the second section, people are talking about a weird smell that's coming from her house.
Emanating to that.
It's
Yeah.
emanating, and like shortly after somebody mentions it to her, it goes away. I believe it's like not long after her father dies. Um, when I remember when her father dies, she won't give him up to be buried immediately until like something happens. Something happens. And then she starts dating the Confederate guy, I believe, or no, a banker or something,
Someone from the
something
Confederacy.
like that.
Yeah. I don't
And
think he's portrayed to be a very good guy. I don't think so.
I don't think he's portrayed very much at all. Like he's not that important. It's important that she starts dating him for the most part.
Yeah.
There is a little bit of characterization, but
Well,
it's
yeah,
not
okay, like when
much.
he yells at the black people, that's starts cussing the black people.
I do not remember that. But
It
um
makes it bad in my book. Sorry,
but while
guys.
while she's dating him, she asks for rat poison and gets arsenic. And then people are just like she's going to kill herself with rat poison, and then she didn't. She didn't kill herself. She's still alive.
Yeah, you thought something interesting was
Um
gonna happen. The short story doesn't.
well, it does at the end. I do think the ending is interesting. So yeah, she's still alive and she's like resistant to change. She grows old and overweight. They get like a proper postal system, and she refuses to put like the mailbox in. And then by the end, she dies, and people come in and they explore her home, and it's the one room that nobody's been in for many many years, and it's like her bridal room. And that banker guy is like dead on the bed. Um, and
With the silver
next
hair.
and on the
Yeah.
pillow next to it, there's a long silver hair. So she killed him and was like being a necrophiliac,
Oh.
pretty much.
Now, okay, now that okay. See, I didn't make that connection. See, I thought
Yeah.
that just ended on a very much of an anticlimax. So, whoa.
No, no, she killed him and was being a necrophiliac. And she also like I had to read up about this story afterwards because it confused me a little bit. The whole point is that she's like representative of the South in the South's like being very resistant to
This is change.
change.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that change is most represented in like the deaths of the people around her, although there's other stuff in the story like the postal system that I talked about. There's other smaller things, but the death is the big thing because when her father dies, she's unwilling to give up his body because she doesn't want that part of her life to go away. And then I think the article that I read, the thing that I read, basically said that she killed the guy ultimately to like make it so that that part of her life could not change from that point on. She could kill him and keep him and sleep next to him forever, and that part of her life would go unchanged, no matter what happened. And it was something like eventually death wins out and change happens because she dies and she doesn't sleep next to him anymore or something. Um, but yeah, I thought it was interesting.
Ish.
Like, it was okay.
Yeah.
The symbolism's interesting. The ending is interesting.
Just
But
getting to that point.
yeah, yeah, just wasn't a great story. Honestly, I
Yeah.
kind of want to move on.
Yeah. I mean, there's a song by the Zombies.
Oh my god,
It's also
that's the
all
only
right. Yeah,
reason
that's
we
the only
read
reason
this.
I picked it, and it
Yeah,
was even the song's disappointing.
and I didn't want to pick this one. This I
I was so
wanted to do
adamant on
barn.
it.
I want to do barn burning, dry September, and two soldiers. And Justin was like, "Nah, let's
Nah, come
do
on,
a
we can
roast
add
for
yeah.
Emily."
And this is why I don't get to pick anything anymore.
You pick your own book every month.
That's the appeal of this club.
Yep. So barn burning because I want to move on from a roast for Emily. It's fine.
Mhm.
It's fine. It's
Yeah.
not long. So if you know Faulkner, if you like Faulkner, give it a read. But
He has better short stories.
he has better short stories, definitely. Barn burning. We're gonna take this in like I'm still afraid the recording is just gonna stop. But so we're gonna take this in chunks. So we open, there's a boy who is sitting in a courtroom as his father is on trial because his father's employer, who owned the farm that his father was using, is suing him because apparently he set the barn on fire, according to his landlord, I guess it
Yeah,
would be.
something like that.
Um, and you know, he kept catching the father's hog who kept escaping, and eventually he asked for $1 because he
Mm.
kept catching it for him. And the father sent a black man with $1 who said, he say to tell you wood and hay can burn. Uh, but he doesn't have any actual proof. So the judge basically just he's like, I can't convict you of anything, but I'll tell you this: get out of town before sundown. And so the dad's like, okay, and he
Okay.
takes his whole family to move on to the next job that he apparently his son thinks he already has lined up. One detail I actually forgot to mention is that the boy gets called up to the stand. Um, and it seems like neither the dad nor the landlord can tell if the boy is going to tell the truth, which is that his dad did light the barn on fire, or if the boy's going to lie for his dad, because the landlord says that he doesn't want the judge to question the
Mm.
uh the boy. Um, but yeah, so case gets dismissed. The dad gets kicked out of town. The dad is a Confederate veteran who has a limp from being shot in the leg. At one point, the son, after being unsure himself if he was going to side with his dad or tell the truth, um, as they're leaving, somebody yells "barn burner," and the son is like mad. And he basically he defends his dad outside of court several times, even though he almost was going to tell the truth about what happened.
Mm.
Um, and his dad at one point, I think while they're traveling to the next farm, is like, "Oh, you were gonna tell him, weren't you?" And then he hits him, just like smacks him, but like the
Yeah.
same way that he would smack like an animal, not like his he's reprimanding his son,
Mm.
like the same way that he would like it says strike either of them with a stick in order to kill a horsefly. Uh and so he says you got to learn to stick with your own blood or you ain't going to have any blood to stick to you. So, stay loyal to your family or you won't have anywhere to turn later. Um Then they arrive at the farm, at the new farm that his dad already had lined up for after burning that barn down. And they go. This one's the longest short story we read.
Yeah, also the
They,
densest, in my
yeah,
opinion.
it's very dense, 14 pages. And so the dad and the main son go to visit the new landlord in town. So it's a ways off from. I think it was in town. Maybe it was a mansion. I don't remember.
Mm.
Um, but it's a ways off from the house at least. So they go to the landlord's place, and the dad walks in, and there's like a black man who's like a butler type thing, and he's
Yeah.
like by the door, and he's like, "Don't wipe your feet before you come in." And the dad is feels superior to the black person, and so he just barges right in, and he drags horse manure on a
The rug.
carpet
Yeah,
on
the
the
carpet.
rug. And he drags it like more and like on purpose after he is told to leave by a white woman, Miss Luna, or Miss Lula rather. Um, Turns out the landlord wasn't even here. Anyways, um, the father is eventually ordered to clean the carpet. He gets his two daughters to do it. He's not happy with the job they did, apparently. He takes a stone to it. He ends up ruining it. They take it back to the landlords, him and his son, the main son. Um, and the landlord is pissed. He's like, that rug costed $100. We're adding 20 bushels of corn to your contract. The dad takes that. The son is actually on the dad's side. That's not worth 20 bushels of corn. He's not getting any bushels of corn. So
And
they take the landlord to court, and the judge agrees, and he says 10 bushels of corn.
mm,
Um, and he acknowledges that basically, like, the dad did wrong the landlord. But it's 20 bushels of corn, 10 bushels of corn.
mm,
And the son still on his side. He's not going to get any corn from us, Dad. And the dad's like, we'll see. And then like it seems like the next day or like 2 days later or something, the son is like doing something, and he just hears from the house. His mom is like, no, don't, please.
oh,
And the dad is like ready to burn down another barn, and the son, he's like ordering the son around, and the son's like, no, Dad. He says, aren't you going to send a black person without, he says something
yeah.
else.
Just assume whenever we
Um,
say it,
yeah,
we're covering up Faulkner's
yeah,
preferred language.
yeah. At least his preferred language for the story.
Yeah.
Um, I would imagine, Faulkner. I can't back this up with any facts, but I would imagine Faulkner would use the Spanish word for black that was popular back then instead of the
The
hard R.
harsher. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. I can't back that up with anything. I just, I know he was like not the typical Southern like racist. He was like Booker T. Washington, except not, but you get what I
Yeah.
mean.
Version of the
He was a moderate. He was a moderate. He wasn't like a full out. Anyhow,
yeah.
um, I don't know. Faulkner's racial thing is very complex, but I really like the messages in his stories about it. Like for the time, they're very
Yeah.
like good and fairly progressive, and they even, I think, stand the test of time. A lot of the actual messages, even if the way that the message is presented doesn't like stand the test of time in terms of like being politically correct.
Yeah. I can also agree with that. There's probably more stories that are just very for like have very good messages.
Hmm.
Probably not told the best ways for our standards, but
Right.
probably for the time.
Yeah.
Good on you, Faulkner.
Anyhow, back to the story. So, the father makes the mom hold down the son because he's disrespecting his dad, and he's like, "Hold him down while I go, burn this barn, and you make sure you hold him down because otherwise he's gonna run up the road and tell the landlord." Somehow the dad knows this. I don't know how. Uh, and so then the son eventually gets loose, and he runs up the road. His mom and his aunt, who is there for some reason, are on his side. Like they don't want him to burn the barn, but like the mother is probably fearful of the dad being abusive because he clearly is.
Mm,
um
yeah.
and so the son gets loose, and he runs up the road, and he tells the landlord, he's like, barn, barn, barn. And the landlord is like, get that kid. And then the kid runs away. But the landlord runs down the road, almost running the kid over in the process to try and save his barn. He hears two shots, and he says, paw, paw, which is his affectionate name for his dad. And it's implied, I think, that the father is killed. And then there's a moment at the end when the boy is sitting alone on a hill. It's dark, but it's also almost dawn, and the night's almost over. He gets up, and he's a little stiff, but he starts walking toward the dark. I'll quote this: toward the dark woods within which the liquid silver voices of the birds called unceasing, the rapid and urgent beating of the urgent and quiring heart of the late spring night he did not look back.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there's clearly a sense of unsurety, a sense of loneliness. He doesn't have the support system that he did because he foregoed his family loyalties um, in order to do the right thing, do the just thing, because
Yeah.
that's really the crux of this story: is family, being loyal to your family versus justice, and doing what is right.
It was very well written. I've only read through this once, so I don't have much to say
Hmm.
because this is the kind of story that you kind of need to read through it again because it jumps
Yeah,
around in time a lot
it's
and
very dense.
yeah, a lot of long sentences. But I
Us,
think you're
there were several times that a new scene started, and I didn't know for like a full paragraph. I
yes,
didn't know that it
exactly.
was a different scene until like a paragraph or two later.
Yeah, which is for better or for worse because Faulkner was very skilled at using it.
Yeah.
Again, the anti-Hemingway wrote very long, complex sentences. Sometimes he holds the world record for the longest sentence in
Yep.
in an English book.
Absalom,
Uh,
Absalom,
yeah, with
which is
exclamation
not
marks.
something we read.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, my apologies for not really fully comprehending it, but I also do want to say that Haruki Murakami wrote a story with the same name, Barn Burning, and
Hmm.
it also got turned into a movie. So the same premise of just like someone burning a barn, but this
Dang.
time this guy's doing it for fun. So kind of
Yeah.
relates. Yeah.
Um. The story is interesting. I think the meaning behind it is interesting. Um. I think it's also clear that there's like a bit of um a tragedy to it. Uh. There's some tragedy to it where it's like the father is doing this because it seemingly because he is resentful of his lot in life after being a veteran. And he's resentful of his lot in life in general. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And so there's like an element of tragedy to it where the father might not be like this, you know. And there's hope in the boy that his father can change and stop doing it, but his father just keeps going,
Yeah.
keeps doing it.
Yeah. And that's really all I have to say because I can't really say much about it because again, kind of went through my head. Some of it came through my head,
Yeah.
and some of it I was very impressed. But I think you fully comprehend the story more than I do. So I'm like, yeah,
Um, all right, let's do Two Soldiers real quick. I think this was actually my favorite to read.
yes, because I
Um,
could actually fully comprehend it on the first go.
it was my favorite to read. I think the meaning behind it is still like it was still good, but it didn't feel as rewarding as the other ones to get to understand because
Yeah.
it's more clear.
Honestly, yeah, I also
Um,
think this is most simple one or simplest one.
the simplest one of the four we read. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Very
Um,
straightforward.
mhm.
I mean, we could all sum it up with honestly, okay, I keep on thinking that Faulkner wrote like the 1930s, but no, this happened in World War II, like Pearl Harbor. Um,
Well, he wrote. I think he wrote for like 2 decades. He wrote for like a long time.
yeah, at the same time as Hemingway, wherever that was.
Yeah.
So basically, two soldiers tell the story about one boy, two brothers actually. After hearing word about Pearl Harbor, one of the boys wants to sign up for the army, and the other boy wants to do it, his younger brother. But everyone in this family was like, "Nah, don't do it. You're too young. You're too young for the draft. Don't do it." But the boy's still determined. I think n- not even for sense for his patriotism, but more for just to follow in the footsteps of his brother. His brother wants to do it for patriotism, and eventually the brother gets sent away, and the older brother that's going to the army gets sent away, and as the brother stays back,
Well,
because
he
he
doesn't get
promised
sent away. He chooses to
he
go.
chooses,
He
yeah,
wants to go. Yeah.
get kind of it, yeah, and tells his younger brother to like stay at home, tend to the family matters and everything, and he kind of grows tired of that after a while, and he goes forth to I think just for his brother signed up, and then to Memphis. Essentially, it's the same thing. Like your brother went here, and they all
I'm
are just,
I'm gonna go there to catch him before he leaves.
and he's out there. Your princess is in another castle.
That's not whip. That's not true. That's
um,
but he is there. He's in
I thought that was
Memphis.
at yeah, oh, okay. I thought there was something right beforehand. Like he goes there and
Well,
then he's in
so
Memphis.
no, so he goes, so he's heading to Memphis, and he gets to a town, and he's like, I did not
Ooh.
realize Memphis was 88 miles away, and so he's like, it took me all night to walk 22 miles. How am I gonna get to Memphis before my brother leaves? And so he talks to like a policeman, and policeman's
Huh.
like, where are you headed? Where are your parents? And he's like, I gotta get to my brother in Memphis. The guy's like, how'd you get down here? And then there's this whole escapade, which basically ends in like him getting this nice old lady to pay for his bus ticket to Memphis.
Yeah.
And
I
then
really simplified that, yeah.
he gets there and he's like stabs a soldier or whatever because he gets into an argument with him about his brother. But eventually they figure out he's just looking for his brother, and they like get his like paperwork, and they're like,
There's a
ah,
cat, sorry. There's a cat.
he was sent, um, he was sent to, um, or he's getting sent away. He's getting on a train today. He gets on a train in 50 minutes. That we'll go get him for you. And so they get him, they bring him back, and his brother Pete is essentially like, "What are you doing here? Why did you stab that guy? How did you get here?" And is like, "I want to go with you to join the army." And the brother's like, "No, you can't do that. They won't take you. You need to take care of
I'm
Ma and Pa."
so sorry about my microphone right now. There's a cat right next to my microphone. But yeah. I am still listening.
Yeah.
Go after.
And basically, like, he gets sent home. He understands that where his brother's, what his brother's saying, that he can't go with him, and so he gets sent home on a by in a car. It sounded like
Yeah,
they were gonna send him by bus, and then he met a nice old lady, and
again,
she
yeah.
sent him by car. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
something
then
like
he
that.
cries on the way home, and he wasn't expecting to cry, but he cries.
Yeah. And I think he's looking at the scenery. I think he's like thinking about and recollecting
Yeah.
on what happened. So yeah. Um again, I don't think again, simplest, there's no iceberg theory here. It's just like, it's very on the surface.
There's
Yeah.
themes of family, loyalty, and brotherhood, and um, patriotism, and what's another one? What's another
Yeah.
one that I can say right now?
Yeah, Cody, you can't leave on that
Um,
and.
innocence, because the brother is
Coming of
very
age.
the kinda, yeah, you could say that. The younger brother is very, very innocent at the beginning. His whole world is his family and his family's farm and his brother. And his brother leaves to go join the army because he feels the sense of patriotism, the sense of duty that he has to. And his the younger sibling is all alone, and he's like, I gotta go with him. I gotta join him. And there's
Yeah.
this loss of innocence on his way home. He realizes like the world is much bigger than he would have ever expected. Um, and so he
Yeah.
gets, I guess he gets very sad. I think part of it is also like he realizes how far away his brother is actually going to be, and the
Yeah.
kind of danger that he's going to be in. Like
Yes.
he didn't fully comprehend it before doing that trek to Memphis.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah.
Yeah. I wish I feel like I've been taking a back seat, but I think you also covered all the bases. Um also think that like yeah, he's crying over I think it's very biggest what he cries over, but I think it's a culmination of everything you kind of said.
Mhm.
And maybe also I think on the surface it's just like, man, Memphis is beautiful as well. Probably not, but that's what I like to think.
Yeah, I think like
He was looking out the window at the time. And I think it's
yeah.
describing the scenery. So I feel like it's also very implied that he's also thinking about that stuff. On the surface,
Mhm.
you were like, if you read that quote out of context, you would think he's like crying at the beauty of what he sees out the window, but really, it's everything else.
Yeah, I think I think the biggest possibility is maybe he's realizing like something about his home and him and his brother's home.
Yeah.
Um yeah, it's honestly like it's a very good story. Like
Yes.
I would just recommend it on the basis of it being a good story. I don't think there's anything to take away from it that's
Yeah.
like grandiose or some grand revelation
Also,
or even
I'm just
like
realizing this doesn't have any racial slurs in it.
it does not. There's no
Yes.
wait, hold on. There might actually have been.
Oh,
Hold on. I Because I think there's a black guy. Yeah, there's one.
oh, never mind.
The chauffeur at the end is black.
We almost had it.
We almost had it. The last page, Faulkner. Come on.
Oh,
Come on. Ugh. It's
yeah,
one of those things. He was writing about the Southern experience, and like in this time, you can't have the Southern experience without reading a few N words.
yeah.
Unfortunately, um, it is what it is.
Yeah.
He definitely Faulkner himself. After when I first was like, okay, we're gonna read Faulkner, and I started reading a little bit about him, I was like, oh no, this guy might be a little racist.
All signs
Um,
point towards yes, but
Yeah,
reading his
but
stories,
when you read the stories, when you
kind
understand
of.
his positions, yeah, he probably had some bad opinions on race. Yes, undeniable, completely undeniable. Um,
By our standards today.
but
Mm-hmm.
he was a moderate, and he was against a lot of the injustices that that ruled the day in the South. And I think another big thing is he was. And another thing that I felt from Two Soldiers is that there's a lot of like Southern pride in his stories, but
Mm-hmm.
also a lot of like guilt and critique of the bad parts of the South.
Uh-huh.
Two Soldiers feels like a story about Southern pride, pride in your brotherhood and your family and your country. Um, while a lot of the other stories that he wrote feels like a combination, maybe there's a little bit of a pride about your heritage and the place that you come from, but there's also a lot of like this part of it is very very bad,
Mm.
very bad. um at least that's the sense that I got from the novel that I read, which we'll talk about next week.
Does he ever denounce the Confederacy? Because I feel like he's just treating it as a
So yeah, I read a quote from him one time where he said if there was another secession, then he would be Robert E. Lee, where it's his
oh,
home, and so he joins because it's his home, but not because he agrees with the reason that they would secede. Like I
oh,
said, Southern moderates. That it's
less
he
bad reasons is still bad. Yeah,
definitely has some bad opinions, but
some of
uh,
them are good.
some of them are good, and I think the reason why I would defend Faulkner in totality is not because like I would defend everything that he says, but because the good opinions that he has stand the test of time. I
Mm,
think the messages in his books, even if they're delivered in a way that you have to you have to deal with him throwing a few N
yeah,
words in there because like he's writing about the South at the time or what have you. Um, the actual message often feels like it stands the test of time. And I'll say this also: some of the messages might not. I haven't read all of Faulkner. It's entirely possible
yeah.
that there are some messages in there about people that do not stand the test of time.
Mm,
In fact, I've heard that he has some descriptions in some of his novels that he often uses like animal metaphors for African Americans more often than he does for white people. Um, is that him? Is that him writing in like the Southern thought process? I don't know. It happens probably too often. That's bad.
yeah. We can only move
Um,
forward. Looking
right.
now, yeah.
But a lot of the messages that Faulkner actually wrote that I've read personally, um, the themes to me, the ones that I've read stand the test of time, I think. Um, and yeah.
Yeah, I would say so too. The thing I like about Faulkner is that he does he he makes it look authentic. For better or for worse, he looks at like the underbelly of the South at the time. At least in the book I read, which was The Sound and the Fury, he just kind of looks at the underbelly and the not so shiny parts of the South.
Mhm.
And no one's perfect. People are flawed, and maybe that was the time of the South. So
Yeah. It's difficult because Faulkner is such a talented author, and a lot of his themes and messages are good by even today's standards, and he clearly felt guilty about some of the I think he felt guilty about some of the bad opinions he did have. Um but at the same time, like, those do exist, and we don't know the man himself. We don't know how much, because I think, like, even the message in some of his stories is that the main character who we're supposed to like is not the best person in the world in
mm,
some of these stories. And so it's like, how much of what he wrote about a character's thoughts and the way that they saw other people is him, and how much of it is uh those characters. I don't think we'll ever know, and I lean towards just, kind of keeping him at arm's length, because
yes,
if it is him, that's terrible.
yeah,
But he's such a talented author, and I feel like I'm rambling. He's such a
yeah,
talented author. The messages are good, but, like, there's just a worry in the back of your head that, like, how racist was he, basically.
yeah.
Um, and I think, you know,
If you're gonna read,
regardless
yeah, you,
regardless, the meanings come forward when you actually read him, and
yeah,
those meanings are tend to be good, I think.
yeah. If you're gonna look at older art, you're gonna have to discard some really problematic stuff to get to the really good stuff. Or sometimes you're gonna have to look at it as a whole, and sometimes some blemishes will appear. Sometimes it's up to you to ignore that. It's really up to you if you want to exaggerate them or ignore them completely, or accept them as they are, and know that they won't tarnish your perspective.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard with someone like Faulkner. With Lovecraft, I always feel like, oh, such a terrible person, but, like, the stories. But Faulkner wrote about race.
Mm,
So it's much harder to separate that man um from his art, when the thing that we're worried about with the man is also the thing that he's writing about.
yes.
Um it's it's difficult. It's difficult to parse out.
Yeah. Um, I feel like this is going to be a recurring theme.
Yeah.
Once we keep on looking back in older American authors, probably that's okay. That's not just American. It's not
Older
unique to America.
authors.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so hooray!
Yeah. Well, on that kind of sour note, Faulkner is good. Give him a try, like, genuinely. I don't
Yeah,
know how much more I'll read of him after I finish my novel for next week. I would imagine I might read one more book or two. I probably won't complete him like I will with some
yeah,
other authors, but he's a very talented author, and a lot of his themes and meanings, I think, are still good to read
yes,
today.
yeah.
Um,
Very challenging as well. Like
yes,
to really understand,
very
as you can
dense.
tell.
Yeah,
Yes. Sometimes even experimental.
it's true. That's also true. But yeah, give him a shot. And I guess on that note, you can find us on Twitter at Not Just Any Pod, where you'll
Mhm.
find information on this show as well as our tabletop RPG show, Not Just Any RPG, if you're into that. Also, whatever you're listening to us on, give us a good rating, follow us, whatever it is, on whatever platform. We'd really appreciate it. And
Join us next week for
join us,
us actually reading Faulkner.
yeah, his
And
novels.
yes, and for my favorite book of his, Goodbye Prometheus.
Oh my god.